Hello, it's Abby. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing another video in my Reading Around the World challenge, and today we are back in South America. The countries I'm going to be talking about today are Colombia, Peru, Uruguay, Venezuela, and Surinam. So, the first one I want to talk about is Colombia. We have The Man Who Could Move Clouds by Ingrid Roja Contreras. And this is a memoir, so it is a nonfiction text that follows her and her family, and they believe that their family has a magical gift that's passed down through generations. But after something happens, like a tragic event, and they get amnesia, and then they are able to have this gift. It originally starts with, I believe, her grandfather, who is like a medicine man, and women are not supposed to follow in this tradition, but her mother decides that she's kind of going to have this gift as well. And the story as a whole is an exploration of memory and family and how tragedy impacts us. So her mother's story, before she gets the gift, she falls down a well and is there for a substantial amount of time. And by falls down the well, she believes one of her cousins pushed her down the well. And then Ingrid's story, she was hit by a car door while she was on her bicycle when she's in New York, and it's just like she never really believed her mother or her grandfather until it happens to her. Like, she completely forgets who she is. She doesn't like know who her fiance is, but she's like having these vivid visions of home. So this was definitely an interesting read in that it seems very magical realism, and yet it is a true story. And so we have a narrator who is seeing if she even believes in these gifts. And then you have family members who both vehemently believe that they're gifts, and those that believe that it's a curse and something that they should never have played around with. And so I felt like the descriptions of the family and how they treat one another, and also like this idea of being able to leave your body and control different things. It almost seems like dream walking, or like magic, but knowing that something is wrong with someone, or being able to figure out these different things, and that being a family gift. But this is a really interesting story. I listened to it as an audiobook read by Marisol Ramirez, and I would definitely recommend it if you're at all interested in Colombian history and kind of the different class struggles there. And yeah, it was a really interesting story, so check it out. For Peru, I read Hormone of Darkness, which is a poetry collection, and it was compiled together by Farid Matak. The description says, in Tilsa Ota's The Hormone of Darkness, we find a queer Latinx person who has lived through iterations of authoritarian rule, and who answers these conditions by creating poetry that doubles down on a life force that predicts and exceeds received notions of the poetic. Here poetry is body, fabulous, and spiritual. In short, is alive. Oda has created a heaven where readers can go after they die. Drawing from 4 volumes spanning Oda's career, translator, poet Farid Matak has curated a playlist we can dance and dream to, one that honors Oda's drive toward liberation through both Peru in the club and trans-dimensional wandering among the stars. And always when reading poetry collections, I wonder what's being lost in translation, but I do think The translator did an excellent job of trying to keep the essence of what is being talked about. These poems are definitely not super accessible, in that they are very like metaphysical. But I really did enjoy the poetry collection. It did have both the original and then the translation right next to it, page by page, although my Spanish is limited. Here is the titular poem to try to give you like a sense of the type of poetry that it is. A nightclub doesn't make a summer. I believe more in Peru, play everlasting, in the agitation of critical mass, so it bows before itself, who hasn't dreamed of reason. What good books you got, don't ever forget. Porn sites aren't secured, they trigger flashbacks of our lives you can't shut down. Don't ever forget us. We transmit the viral international language of love. Pagan gods gave us life, but we will take more. I have 3 X chromosomes, but I want 4 pluses. I want to be the hormone of darkness. I want to see who can open their mouth the most, who has the longest tongue. The most cops disarmed and then armed again, who put a hole where there was once a law, a prick where there was a whistle, hysterically holding up traffic. The stoplights get even redder. The windows to the street don't open. Our bodies leak and we dance in an heteropatriarchal position, which is to say barely metaphysically present, and the very busy clouds, rain, and oh how they come, over the sewers with a chiding grimace of a baby on citrus. Assassins on shift around the world, spared our lives, but we want more. We've got 3 wishes, but I want all the genius, all the wanting, to be your growth hormone. Let's go to bed to get our dreams back, get our friends safe. Never forget we're the filling in the same God plushie the children hug when they're scared. Luckily, there are all kinds of folks, imaginary friends and actual friends, who believe in you, and that's why we're possible. Don't you forget, there are planets on other lives. So, as you can see what I mean, it's definitely not a really simple poetry collection, but I always really like to see how people play with language and, again, how things are translated. And I just thought this was a great one to check out. I also had a really hard time finding anything from Peru that was translated and not by dead white men or not super accessible to like get. This one had just been published in English and I was able to buy it, but some of this challenge has been trying to just find or have access to these things. Alright, next we have Uruguay, Springtime in a Broken Mirror by Mario Benedetti and translated by Nick Castor. And the description of this is an extraordinary story of love in exile from one of the great masters of Latin American novel, translated into English for the first time. Santiago is trapped, taken political prisoner in Montevideo after a brutal military coup. He can do nothing but write letters to his family and try to stay sane. Far away, his 9-year-old daughter Beatrice wonders at the marvels of 1970s Buenos Aires, but her grandpa and mother, Santiago's beautiful, careworn wife, Graciela, struggle to adjust to a life in exile. Graciela fights to retain the fiery passion that suffused her marriage, her politics, and her whole life, as day by day Santiago edges closer to freedom. But Santiago's rakish, reckless best friend is a constant brooding presence in the exiles' lives, and Graciela finds herself drawn irresistibly toward him. A lucid, heart-wrenching saga of a family torn apart by the forces of history. Springtime in a Broken Mirror tells with tenderness and fury the indelible imprint politics have on the individual lives. Generous and unflinching, it asks whether the broken bonds of family and history can ever truly be mended. And this is definitely a depressing story. We have a husband and wife and a friend group in general that is super political and trying to fight for their country, but when one of them is taken to prison, then that impacts all of them. Santiago in prison has never met his daughter, or he left when she was very, very little. She has this grand idea of what her dad is and what it means to stand up for freedom. A lot of her perspective of the book is like learning new words and then trying to figure out life based on the definition of those words. But she will like ask a friend at school who will give her one definition of a word. She'll kind of have a working definition of the word in her head, and then oftentimes she'll ask her mother or grandfather, and the grandfather is the father of the guy who's in jail, to define these words. And so her outlook on life is very much, I mean, she's a young girl growing up, so she is learning language at the same time she's learning the politics of her family and her country, and also being exiled to Buenos Aires and being away from her father. The mother is struggling with the fact that she still loves the father, but she doesn't love that, like, they might have naturally been able to grow and maybe they wouldn't have still been together if they were together, but she feels awful moving on because he's in prison. So she has very conflicted feelings of like, I'm a woman and I have needs, but like he did nothing wrong. He was fighting for causes we both believed in. And then she's having an affair with his best friend, which obviously complicates it more than her just being like with some random guy. So we also get his perspective of what it's like to be like there for her and trying to support her, but then also he always had feelings for her, so he feels like he's a really crummy friend. And then we have the grandfather's perspective and how he doesn't want his son to know about any of the stuff that's going on the outside because he wants his son to continue to have hope. So he tries to get like his daughter-in-law not to mention these things, tries to keep it away from his granddaughter. And then we have the guy in prison and his kind of musings on his life. And it's a very short book for like a lot of family drama and a lot of political drama. And I found myself like looking up different conflicts and different things within the country, because I don't know very much about Uruguay at all, and so kind of looking up the history of the different presidents and the coups that are happening there. But anyway, I definitely recommend this book. It's a short read, but it's a powerful character study. For Venezuela, I read It Would Be Night in Caracas by Karina Ciansborgo. And it was translated by Elizabeth Breyer, and I listened to the audiobook performed by Ana Osorio. And the description of this book is: in Caracas, Venezuela, Adelaida Falcone stands over an open grave, alone except for harried undertakers. She buries her mother, the only family Adelaida has ever known. Numb with grief, she returns to the apartment they shared. Outside the window, she tapes shut every night to prevent the tear gas raining down on protesters in the streets from seeping in. When looters masquerading as revolutionaries take over her apartment, Adelaida resists and is beaten up. It is the beginning of a fight for survival in a country that has disintegrated into violence and anarchy, where citizens are increasingly pitted against each other. But as fate would have it, Adelaida is given a gruesome choice that could secure her escape. This story was definitely the most disturbing of the stories I've read for South America so far, and that's saying something because Jawbone is actually a horror story and this is just supposed to be historical fiction. But we're given like a snapshot of Adelaida's life both pre her mom dying and after her mom dying, and like her mom dies Her home is taken away. Her friend's brother is tortured and assaulted. Her fiance is killed in a gruesome way because he's a photographer and a journalist, and he kind of gets on the bad side of the cartel and is killed in a way that I can't even describe here on YouTube, but terrible. There's also just like this somber tone over everything that's happening, but then like there's strange scenes where, like, at one point she stumbles across this funeral, and there's like a casket. It's for someone from the cartel, and there's like these young girls essentially like humping the casket, and like everyone's like dancing around so excited because this person has like died honorably, even though they're like the ones making Venezuela unsafe. They're supposed to be like helping get the country back, but that is not what's happening. A couple quotes that stuck out to me. Everything outside our family of two was the exception, supplementary, and for that reason, expendable. We weren't waiting on anyone, we had each other, and that was enough. So before her mom dies, she has this kind of bubble of her life, and then after her mom dies, she's like, her eyes are open to all these terrible things that are happening and the things that she needs to do to survive. She also, another quote, we buried my mother with her things, her blue dress, her black flats, and her multifocals. We couldn't say goodbye in any other way, couldn't take those things from her. It would have been like returning her to the earth incomplete. We buried it all because after her death we were left with nothing, not even each other. That day we were struck down with exhaustion. She in her wooden box, I on a chair in the dilapidated chapel, the only one available of the 5 or 6 I tried for the wake. I could hire it for only 3 hours. Instead of funeral parlors, the city now had furnaces. People went in and out like loaves of bread, which were in short supply on the shelves, but rained down in our memory whenever hunger overcame us. So, very turbulent times in Venezuela. It's not taken place in like a particular real life time, but it's like a dystopian time for Venezuela. But a lot of, in researching it, like looking things up while reading the story, a lot of these types of things have happened during different periods. It's kind of just like accumulating them. But anyway, we're following our main character, and we want to see if she can get out of Venezuela and survive past this. And then for Surinam, I read On a Woman's Madness by Astrid H. Romer and translated by Lucy Scott. And this is a very confusing story. It kept jumping around in time from like when she's young and she's kind of married off early into arranged marriage. When it starts off, she's like already in, I don't really want to ruin it. It starts off writing letters to someone who's in prison. We don't really know who it is or what's going on. On Kindle, it didn't, so I borrowed this from the library. It didn't like break it up into chapters at all either, so that was tough. It was just like a one really long chapter of a book. And then there's large chunks of time where absolutely nothing is happening, and then all of a sudden like all these things are happening. So the exact description is, when Noenka's husband refuses her request for divorce, she flees her small hometown for the city, where life is simultaneously free and unfree, an open book, a closed door. Pulled between societal conventions and the aspirations of a woman with new opportunities, Noenka is stuck juggling her sexuality, her religion, and her culture. She misses her dead mother, and her feelings towards her father, a descendant of slaves turned successful plantation owners, are complicated. She loves or has loved Ramses, the enigmatic orchid collector, maybe her white tennis partner Alec, and finally Gabrielle, a woman in prison for a crime of passion with whom Noenka exchanges letters. When it all becomes too much for her to take, the desperation leads to disaster, Noenka is left exposed in the brutal white light of Surinam. Wrestling with God, tradition, and sexuality in hallucinatory fragments, Astrid Romer's On a Woman's Madness is a contemporary classic of post-colonial and sexual freedom. Artfully translated from Dutch by Lucy Scott, the novel unspools to reveal a shocking portrait of this radically inclusive woman who speaks like an incantation. I am Noenka, which means not again, born of two opposites, a woman, a man, who pull even my dreams wide open. I am a woman, even if I don't know where that begins and where being a woman ends. In other people's eyes, I am black, and I keep wondering what that means. Each step Noenka takes for stability, for pleasure, for opportunity is saturated with meaning ascribed without her consent. Her movements echo through an impatient world as her madness. So, I don't know if I would recommend this book or not, just because it was very confusing. But it does have like a freedom around sexuality. We have a marriage that denied a divorce because women really don't have power in this society. She's also looked down upon because she's black. Her father is very superstitious. Her mother is very religious. And she just like doesn't know if she believes in God. She gets enamored of this guy Ramses, who kind of like lives a commune kind of life, with friends in and out of his orchid gardens. And yeah, it's just one of those things where I had to keep being like, who's talking, what's happening. But I do feel like I learned about the different cultural disparity, like having the fact that her family starts as slaves but then make their way up to slave owners, and that the kind of like marrying of people until you are passing, not white, but white enough. And it just was a really interesting look at the country, even though it was very fragmented and the story itself was kind of all over the place. I do feel like I like emotionally was there with her being torn between religion and superstition, propriety, like her marriage in theory should be what she wants and what she should be doing, but then the things that her husband does to her are not good. So then she lives in sin and immorality, sleeping with other people, but those people in theory treat her better. It's just a very interesting book of like of having these like contrasts. But anyway, that's what I read for Surinam. Alright, so that wraps up the second part of my reading around the world, South America. The next video you have from me will probably not be South America, because I'm trying to get a hold of some of the books that I am reading for this last half. So if you have any recommendations for any of those countries that you think would be easier to track down, let me know. Otherwise, like I said, I'll just probably read some other things while I'm trying to get those ones together. But if you are doing this challenge yourself, let me know what you're reading for the different countries. If you want any more information on any of these books, let me know, because I try not to spoil them when talking about them. And I will see you in the next video.